The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon over the dusty stretch of Highway 41, casting long, jagged shadows across the asphalt for Jackson Miller, a pair of lifelong friends and seasoned bikers. This was supposed to be a routine Saturday run. Just the roar of their engines and the smell of pine in the air, they were big guys by any standard. Leather jackets, faded tattoos, and grizzly beards. The kind of men people often cross the street to avoid, but beneath the tough exterior, Jax was. A father of 2 girls, and he had a sixth sense for trouble that usually served him well. As they coasted at a steady 60 miles per hour, an old, dented silver minivan swerved past them. Cutting dangerously close to Jax's front tire, Jax felt a surge of adrenaline, ready to honk his horn, but then he saw it. Through the grimy, tinted back window of the van, a small hand pressed against the glass. It was tiny, trembling, and pale. For a fleeting second, the tint faded just enough for Jax to lock eyes with a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her eyes weren't just crying, they were screaming. She didn't make a sound, but her lips moved in a desperate, silent plea. "Help me." The van accelerated, tires screeching as it tore toward the upcoming mountain pass. Most people would have seen a reckless driver and kept moving, thankful to be out of the way. But Jax's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He signaled to Miller, pointing frantically at the van. Miller saw the panic in his friend's eyes and understood immediately. This wasn't a traffic dispute. This was a nightmare in motion. Without a word, the 2 men kicked their bikes into high gear, the roar of their Harleys echoing like a war cry against the silent plea of a terrified child. The van driver realized he was being followed. He began to drive like a man with nothing to lose, weaving through the light evening traffic and clipping the shoulders of the road. Jax and Miller didn't back down. They knew that if they lost sight of that silver van in the winding mountain turns, that little girl might never be seen again. They weren't police officers. They didn't have sirens or badges. All they had was horsepower and a moral compass that refused to point anywhere but toward that girl. "He's going for the old logging trail," Jax shouted over the wind, though he knew Miller couldn't hear him. The van jerked off the main highway, bottoming out as it hit a dirt path shrouded by thick oak trees. The bikers followed, their tires spitting gravel. The trail narrowed, becoming a labyrinth of shadows. Suddenly, the van slammed on its brakes, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. A man stepped out. He was disheveled, frantic, and holding a heavy iron tire iron. "Back off," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Keep riding, or you're dead." From inside the van, the muffled sounds of sobbing broke the silence of the woods. Jax and Miller dismounted slowly, keeping their hands visible but their stances firm. They looked like giants in the fading light. Miller, usually the jokester, had a look of cold steel in his eyes. "We aren't going anywhere," Miller said, his voice low and vibrating with a father's rage. "Open the back door, or this ends very differently for you." The kidnapper looked at the 2 massive men, then at his van, realization dawning on him that his prey wasn't just a child anymore. It was protected by the very men the world told him to fear. The standoff felt like an eternity. The kidnapper's knuckles were white around the tire iron, but as Jax took a step forward, the man's resolve shattered. He dropped the tool and bolted into the thick brush, disappearing into the darkness of the woods. Jax didn't chase him. His priority was the cargo. He rushed to the back of the van and wrenched the door open. There, huddled behind a pile of old blankets and rusted tools, was the little girl. She was shivering, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her hands zip-tied together. When she saw Jax, a massive man in black leather, she shied away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Jax immediately dropped to his knees, making himself as small as possible. He took off his heavy leather jacket, revealing a faded girl dad t-shirt underneath, and held it out gently. "Hey there, little lady," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm Dux. This is my friend Miller. We're the good guys, I promise. You're safe now. No one is ever going to hurt you again." The girl looked at his face, seeing the tears welling in the tough biker's eyes. She saw the kindness that the rest of the world often missed. Slowly, she leaned forward and collapsed into Jax's arms, sobbing into his shoulder. Miller stood guard, his back to them, wiping his own eyes while he called 911. For 30 minutes, Jax sat on the dirty floor of that van, rocking the girl back and forth, whispering that she was a hero. He didn't care about the kidnapper in the woods or the cold night air. He only cared about the tiny heartbeat thumping against his chest, finally slowing down as the terror began to ebb away. By the time the police cruisers and an ambulance arrived, the woods were lit up in red and blue. The officers apprehended the suspect a mile away. He was a fugitive wanted in 3 states. The lead officer walked up to Jax and Miller, who were standing by their bikes, looking exhausted and out of place among the pristine uniforms. "You men have no idea what you did today," the officer said, shaking their hands firmly. "You saved her life." 10 more minutes, and he would have crossed the state line into the wilderness. A few weeks later, a package arrived at the local biker clubhouse where Jax and Miller spent their weekends. Inside was a framed drawing of 2 motorcycles and a little girl with a cape. The note read, "To my guardian angels, thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Love, Lily." The scary bikers didn't hang a trophy or a plaque on their wall that day. Instead, they pinned Lily's drawing in the center of the room, a reminder that their strength wasn't in their engines or their leather, but in their willingness to protect the vulnerable. The story went viral across the country, changing the way people looked at the tough guys on the road. Jax and Miller didn't want the fame. They just wanted Lily to grow up in a world where she knew help was always coming. Every year on the anniversary of that day, Jax and Miller ride that same stretch of Highway 41. They don't look for trouble anymore, but they always keep an eye on the mirrors. They know that sometimes a miracle doesn't come from the sky. It comes on 2 wheels wearing a leather jacket and refusing to look away when a child asks for help. Humanity, they realized, isn't about who you are, but what you do when the world is looking the other way.